Greetings and welcome to another edition of Open Door. On today's show, Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team discuss the recently published From Spears of the Mossi, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 1, and the follow-up, From Spears to Pens, Volume 2. I interviewed them recently. Spears of the Mossi was a collaborative effort by the Mossi warrior clan and the Kofi Piesie Research Team. Ini-Herit Khalfani explains the Mossi warrior clan and its relationship to the research team.
The Mossi warrior clan was started by Brother Black Panther Benjamin Njai and Brother West. They put forth this team, and the primary focus of the Mossi warrior clan is to advance knowledge on West Africa. Black Panther, who is an Ngun priest, is also entrenched in the Yoruba or Ifa traditions. So he comes from the spirit of that, but he's also very heavy on methodology. So the whole Mossi warrior clan, when you think about us, it's not just West Africa, it's all of Africa. But our primary focus is West Africa. It's less talked about, it's not romanticized. It's not commercialized, and this is our direct lineage for people that are in the Americas, so to say, whether you're in North or South America. But it was started through that. The introduction is also in the book, and he tells a little bit more and elaborate on that. But I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, and hopefully those who listen to this at a future date will be able to appreciate the distinction as well. So, T'Challa, you're going to tell us about your name and what it means to you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your relationship to the book.
All right. So T'Challa is a name that we should all be very, very familiar with. May our great brother rise in power. With Bozeman, and then so the character T'Challa, as far as the comic universe, right? He is the Black Panther, King of Wakanda, and there's a lot to him that people really don't understand. And I'll briefly touch on that in a second, but the reason why I carry the name, because I'm a teaching and performing artist here in Chicago with West African culture. So I fit right in with, studying, learning, growing, and experiencing life with brothers like Sean and the rest of the Kofi Piesie Research Team, Mossi Warrior Clan, and Amara Squad affiliate families. Shout out to all of those. So I carry the name because the children here in Chicago, when I would go into the schools and show up, and I would always have something on, either definitely, Marcus Garvey, Red, Black, and Green, or I'm a fan of the comic books. I'm a fan of, all of that stuff, the movies, everything. So I would have on characters, something that had, Marvel merchandise. And if I had on Black Panther, they would say, yeah, you're definitely Black Panther. You are King T'Challa, And I've helped so many youth out here just with explaining to them the connection that they have, as Brother Sean mentioned, directly to West Africa, walking in with a West African drum, telling them about West African stories, the griots, the jellies, the ones that were kidnapped on the ship Jesus and brought over here, right? These are the drums that we had. This is the culture that we had. So I take pride in teaching that and showing them who they are as little Black boys and girls to grow up, to hopefully change the world for the better. And Bangoura is the Mandinka or Malinke name for the panther. So the Mandinka language is in West Africa, typically in the regions that used to be considered part of the Malian Empire. We're talking Mali, Senegal, Gambia, definitely, shout out. Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, Liberia, parts of Benin and Togo. These are the areas that we're talking about when we're dealing with the Malian Empire. So Mandinka, being part of the Mande meta-ethnicity, that's their language, their word in their language for the panther. So it's a kind of a play on words there with my name as well. And so there you have it.
Okay. I can fully appreciate the emphasis on West Africa because, when we hear about our ancestors and we celebrate the greatness of Africa, we sometimes default to Kemet and what came out of Kemet. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there is a direct connection not only between what people call Egypt now or Kemet and West Africa, but other parts of Africa as well. I was privileged to go to Egypt last year with Dr. Runoko Rashidi, and I can remember being in a museum. I can't remember whether it was Aswan or Luxor. I believe it was Luxor. But there was an exhibit within the museum that contained some artifacts that had been discovered by our brother Tony Browder, who's actually from Chicago, but he's out of DC right now. And what he found was that there was some representation of Adinkra symbols in Nile Valley civilization, which is an indication that there was a connection between the folks in West Africa and the folks in Northeast Africa. So, when we deal with this whole narration about enslavement and everything, we process the idea or the possibility that many of us might be from West Africa. But then when you look at that popular narrative, it's kind of a disconnection between West Africa and Northeast Africa. So it's important to look at the continent as a whole and not just romanticize one part of it or one section of it. You also indicated that you're working with young people, and it's something that's very intriguing to me. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about how this wisdom, this knowledge that you're passing on to these young people is being received, and what kind of engagement are you getting from young people in general who have so many choices to make in terms of what they decide to have in their headspace?
Absolutely. So my background with engaging with the youth and wanting to teach stems from two things. One, growing up doing book reports on the Bible, which is where my thirst for learning and knowledge comes in. And reading comprehension, listening comprehension was a strong, staple thing being taught in the household for me. And so that gearing youth towards staying in school or at least being educated was something that came from myself from having to do that even outside of school. I came into West African drums and culture specifically in high school. And I signed up to do an after school matters program to get some mics that year, some Jordans. And next thing I know, I'm like, wait a minute, I have this thirst and passion for what is already, I know that I'm, as an African-American male, as a, teenager in high school, I know I'm a Black male. So yes, I'm definitely going to learn everything that I can about this. And within a year, I turned professional because I put the time in, and I had already been playing drums growing up in church, playing bongos to be specific. Now, most people might think, well, isn't that what you play? Isn't that the name? No, that's not the name of the West African drum. There's no West African drum called bongo at all. But I understand when you don't know and you repeat it, that's what it is. But back to the story, I turned professional doing this and doing my passion in high school. And when I tell kids this, I'm like, I started making money playing drums, learning about who I was, and telling other people about who I was while I was still finishing up what you're doing here. And they're like, wow, you get to come to work, put on Black Panther, wear whatever name you want to wear, and you playing music and like you doing what you want to do. I said, yes, I am. And that's very important to show our babies that you can actually implement whatever you want to do. As we see now, everybody's starting businesses, everybody's taking advantage of COVID-19 and the pandemic. And economically, it's like a little whiffs and remnants of what Black Wall Street, how that started in terms of, the economy being taken advantage of the time period, being back in the early 1900s with the Spanish flu and all of the things that was going on politically then. We're repeating that climate. So it's important that nowadays I go into the students and they really receive the information, because they're looking at a Black man who looks like them, talks like them, walks like them, and he's, not being arrested. He's not being shot, thankfully. And they love seeing that, a positive image that doesn't have to have negative energy attracted to it because I'm trying to be something that I'm not, or trying to be something that, as Shawn said, following somebody else, wearing my pants down and trying to, flaunt like I'm a rapper and I'm not, and I'm just being who I am.
Okay. So you're getting an embrace from them, and you're getting engagement from them, and you're leading by example, and they're seeing the possibilities that exist, that they don't have to be trapped into the paradigm of working a job that they don't like just because they want to make money.
Right.
Yes.
Open Door with Vince Robinson returns with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right after this. You're listening to Open Door Cleveland on 95.9 FM WOVU, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
This program is sponsored by Citizens for Our Children's Future.
Cleveland residents, please support Issue 68. We've seen the graduation rate go up through 80%. We've seen our reading and our math scores increase.
If Issue 68 fails, essential funding runs out, a severe setback for kids.
Cleveland's children, schools, and future go together. That's why it's important that we vote for Issue 68.
Vote for Issue 68. Keep Cleveland kids moving ahead.
Supported by Citizens for Our Children's Future and WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
We are WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United. United to enhance our community. United to be a beacon of hope. United to empower our community. WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United.
We're back with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right here on 95.9 FM WOVU.
This idea of the African warrior scholar, it's a very impactful and profound statement when you understand that there is a war going on right now. And the war is taking place in the minds of our people all over the globe. And our minds have been hijacked by a system of education and racism that is not in our best interest. Could you talk about what it means to be an African scholar and an African warrior scholar at that?
Well, it should be no secret now that T'Challa is very much into self-defense and understanding the need to protect what is my life and those that I love around me, and extend it to the good brothers and sisters that's in the fight. To be an African warrior first is obviously anyone of African descent having any amount of African blood flowing through their veins, not only physically, but their mental capacity is occupied with the ability to be a human being from the African perspective first. Because to be a warrior in African societies, you have to be initiated. And we have to mentally be initiated, connecting it to self-defense when we learn how to box, the way of the empty hand, or otherwise known as karate. You can't just go outside the dojo. You can't just get outside the boxing gym, outside the ring, go to school the next day and start roundhousing people, start jabbing people, right, and dropping people. It's not going to happen because your coach, your sensei is going to come and get you. And so you have to have discipline. And I go to the physical first because we have to understand that we live in a world where we'll look at people that look like us and we'll throw a punch at them quicker than putting some pen to paper to come up with an education that betters their livelihood and their babies. Instead of throwing a punch or loading a gun, why don't I think about how your children and my children are attending the same schools that are causing them to grow up and want to be so hateful and angry that pushes us to want to fight because our kids are fighting. So it's a vicious cycle. To be an African warrior scholar and an African scholar, you have to also be initiated. Every role in African traditions is a role that you're initiated into. And so learning is an African endeavor first on planet Earth. Our species started to rise out of the evolutionary soup of what we were before, the primate type species we were before. And we began to come down out of the trees and we began to learn a different life, a new life that wasn't in the trees. And so that catapulted us and began to lead us to fire, cooking meat. That allowed our minds to evolve even further. So what I'm saying is the scholar endeavor stretches all the way back there because we had to learn real quickly not to go over there because the lions was getting us. And we had to learn how to eventually defend ourselves against everything in nature. So the warrior aspect was bred into us. And so bringing it to today, there is a fight with information, a war more mental. The slavery is more mental than it is physical. It's more about how can I occupy this fill in the blank for people who look like us? How can I occupy their mind? Because I know that I can come at them, I can rough them up in the street. If I got the runaway slave patrol, the police badge, I can rough them up in the street. I can kneel on the necks. I can, as controversial as the topic is, I can no-knock warrant. You know what I'm saying? I can do all these things, period. Because of the law of the land, stretching all the way back to the Papist Bulls. We need to understand those documents to understand why things will continue to be the way that they are. And that is the fight, because people don't know. They say, put it in the book and we won't read it. And that's true, because 400 years of illiteracy, any species is not going to want to do something after 400 years of not doing it. That's just scientific fact. Like, you're not going to be used to doing that as a whole because the culture of your species doesn't practice that. So we have to get back to it because we invented that with the Sesh meta nature, coming out of the meta nature. So if we create reading and writing, because literacy is born in Africa, then we have to understand as Africans, we just taking back our birthright, was rightfully ours.
That's an extremely important point to make because, in many of our communities, it's not cool to be smart. You get ridiculed, for reading and being engaged in those kinds of pursuits. It's not cool. Children get ostracized because of that perception, when in actuality, it's who we're supposed to be. So I really appreciate your insight on that point. I want to bring Ini-Herit back into the conversation and rewind a little bit, because we opened the Pandora's box on They Came Before Columbus, and I have a personal interest in your perspective on what the truth about that situation was. And I think when I reflect on what I was seeing, you posted the cover of a book that was written by someone who I will not name, but he put a photograph of somebody on the cover of the book that was from the 1800s, and it was long after this period of time in which Africans were supposed to have been on ships coming to America. So could you talk about the African presence in America that is contrary to what Brother, I'm losing his, Dan Sertima brought to us in his book?
Yeah. To be honest, you would need archaeological evidence, a language. You would need to see the culture. That's big, the culture and the traditions and everything else. You would need a body of work that would actually answer the question of the African presence in the Americas. Now, you ask, in what capacity were Africans in the Americas before Columbus? And you will get no answer. Okay, so what evidence do we have that corroborates the presence? We don't find any. What we find is, in the early Americas, it was uninhabitable. There was an ice sheet here that was a mile long from the Pacific coast to Illinois, a mile long in the air, ice cap. So who survived on that? Nobody can survive on that. And you know nobody can survive on that. Now, what evidence do we have of earlier Homo sapiens sapien, which is who we are? Modern humans, intelligent, smart beings, right? None.
Yes.
Well, we have this evidence. I would say we don't have any early, but we have it 10 to 12,000 years ago. So we know some people were here. Were these people that were here, did they look like us? No, they didn't look like us at all. So there lies another issue. So we speed it all the way up until before Columbus. I have to do that because I have to show you that, overall, there were humans here in the Americas, but they did not look like you and I. They didn't talk like our ancestors. They didn't carry the ways, the cultures, and the traditions of our ancestors. They didn't deify things a certain way that our ancestors did. They did their own thing in understanding their natural world. Right. So now that we got that out of the way, a little bit of science out of the way, to answer your question, we had no presence. Because if we did, we would find staple foods that we would have brought with us from West Africa to the New World. We would have archaeological evidence. There would be digs in the Americas showing evidence of our ancestors being here in droves or in small capacities, doing the things that they have learned to do on the continent before they crossed the seas. Now, as smart as our ancestors were, do you not think that they actually could build a boat, raft, ship, canoe to travel across the Atlantic? No. The Atlantic was so violent that our ancestors wrote about it in their stories and in history, that they were just afraid to travel across the Atlantic. They would only go out so far. They made canoes. They made when they went to war, their naval ships were war canoes. They weren't building boats. They had no reason to leave where they were. Why would they leave where they were? It made no sense to leave where they were. They had everything that they needed around them. This is just a fact. They had access to all the natural resources possible around them. Maize was brought into West Africa via trade. Who brought it? The earliest travelers across the Atlantic, which happened to be those Europeans who broke the technology ring in the 15th century. So that's how this whole thing starts to crumble about the presence of our ancestors. In what capacity has never been answered. As far as the cultural traditional practices and things of that nature, we don't get an answer. It's just a bunch of unknown, and we're still waiting for corroborating evidence to actually deal with that. Now, this might be intriguing to the listening audience in YouTube, Vince. This may be intriguing. Okay? This all started because of a story that was told in ancient Kemet. I'm going to say that again. This all started because of a story that was told in ancient Kemet. What was that story? That story was the great story of Mansa Musa. What does Mansa Musa have to do with traveling to the New World? This is the first instance of us hearing about the travels to the New World. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much. Because in chapter 1 of volume 3, when it releases, I tell you. I set out the argument from the gate, and I tell you. But this story starts with Mansa Musa. And it happened in Cairo, Egypt, on his way to Mecca. This is the first time the story was ever told. I want you to think about that. Why would this story about Mansa Q be told in Kemet? And that's where we are with that. But, it's our reality. We're here now. What do we do about it?
Open Door with Vince Robinson returns with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right after this. You're listening to Open Door Cleveland on 95.9 FM WOVU, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station. What can you do in the battle against COVID-19? Your first task, wear a mask, protect yourself and others. Armor up, armor up. Give those hands a 20-second shower with soap and water. Armor up, armor up. Give others space 6 feet just in case. Armor up, armor up. Get good nutrition, ingest for digestion. Armor up, armor up. Vitamin C, D3, and more. Armor up, armor up. Elderberries, zinc, and echinacea from the store. Armor up, armor up. Get some fresh air. Go climb some stairs. Armor up, armor up. Let go of stress. Make sure you rest. Armor up, armor up. Your breath is the key to life. Strengthen your immune system, follow the guidelines, and win the battle against COVID-19.
Armor up, armor up.
This program is sponsored by Citizens for Our Children's Future.
In these challenging days, Cleveland's children need Issue 68. It's a necessity for a better education, a better life. Issue 68 provides the teachers, programs, and technology that will keep reading and math scores rising and the graduation rate climbing. If Issue 68 fails, essential funding runs out, a severe setback for kids. Your vote will keep Cleveland's kids moving ahead. Vote for Issue 68.
Supported by Citizens for Our Children's Future and WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
This is Aja Jones,
Tracy Clark,
Kiko,
Yolanda Armstrong,
Brian Webster.
This is TC Lewis, and you are listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
We're back with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right here on 95.9 FM WOVU.
You know, as you were pointing out certain realities about transportation and so forth, and what I came to arrive at as a quick conclusion, basically, we don't have receipts. I was thinking about the Gullah people in South Carolina, or near South Carolina, in that area of the country. And with them, we do see vestiges of the culture. We see the relationship of them to Africa from, you know, wherever they were from. So it seems as though, from what you're saying, I'm just adding all this up and making sense of it, that we would need to see more evidence of that in other parts of the country that we haven't seen.
Absolutely. We need a bunch of evidence. I mean, the evidence that we see from the Gullah, we know when the Gullah actually arrived there. They were not here before Columbus. They weren't. So we can't use the Gullah Geechee because we actually, you know, through oral traditions and written history and so on and so forth, we have the archaeological evidence of that whole thing. So that's a big piece that we have there. Bringing the culture to the Americas was a big thing as far as that. But we, you know, that's a part of our Africanisms. That's a part of our African experience, our identity of actually who we were as a people. And the emphasis of South Carolina, you know, you got to think about South Carolina was the harbor for a lot of our ancestors that came not only from West Africa directly, but from the Caribbeans and South America. You know, that triangle. People forget that. They didn't bring 10 million. They didn't bring 10 million Africans to North America. No. They took millions to South America. Right there in those islands, they put them there. Why were they sending them there in those particular areas? We're talking about they were dealing with trade. They were dealing with trying to grow crops. They were dealing with sugar, tobacco. You know, sugar was like gold. You think gold was a big deal? Sugar was like gold, ladies and gentlemen. Sugar was a high commodity, so much so that it spawned things like it was a big deal to drop a sugar cube in your coffee. You were like an elite person to drop a sugar cube in your coffee. Think about how simple-minded that is today. That's what was going on with these people and their experiences in those times. So, you know, we dealt with a whole lot. And in that dealing with a whole lot, our story has been messed up. Mm-hmm. Our story has been messed up. Our story has gone really truthfully untold the way it should have been told, because you have the conqueror writing history, and you know that's what we're getting from that. But it's things that we don't know. We're afraid to know, and we just don't want to know because of what we believe.
Mm-hmm. Let me share this with you. I've been privileged to go to Ghana a few different times, and I'm actually on the village registry of Atonkwa, which is near Elmina, where they built the very first slave dungeon. And what they say there is that there was a brother or an African from Elmina who was actually on I believe, the first ship that Columbus took from Africa to this side of the world. How does that line up with what you've learned about the transatlantic trade and the role of Africans in that scenario?
Well, what I learned first is you have to deal with the infiltration of the Portuguese into West Africa. They came as missionaries, traders. They came in peace. Now, they just so happened to stumble upon West Africa, attempting to go to India, right?
Mm-hmm.
This thing was about India, had
Right.
nothing to do with us, right? Now, I can say this because I do write something about a mythological story that actually transpired and a mythological story that is used often. I wrote about that in volume 3 as well. I'm telling a lot about volume 3, but I have my reasons for that now because it tells the story, and I put it in there. It tells a story about their interest in West Africa. Initially, their interest was, remember, they had no interest in West Africa, right? They had no interest in Africans. They didn't think nothing about them, didn't want anything to do with them, ladies and gentlemen. This is an actual fact. They didn't want nothing to do with us in the Balad El Sudan. That is the land of the blacks. Nothing. No interest. They knew we existed there. Why? Because we were being sent to European countries in the 7th and 11th, well, I say the 11th, around the 7th and 11th AD, period. So they knew that we were there, but they had no real interest in us because they had not, began the age of discovery. And they didn't need any labor or anything like that at that time. They wanted to live the way that they wanted to live, how they wanted to live it. So they stumble upon us. And the very first Africans they see, they have conversations and things of that nature. Well, there's really no true conversation, but they're trying to barter or trade with these particular people. And the barter and the trade happens on the coastland. And the way that these people actually trade, they trade from a distance. They will set something out. The Africans in return will bring something out. If it wasn't enough, it stayed right there until more was given. If more was given, then the trade would happen. This was honest trade. Think about that. You bring out an ounce of gold to trade with these people for, let's just say, some beads. And your ounce of gold is not enough for these beads. They manipulated us there in trade. And that's pretty much where the game began to unravel. And they knew that the Arabs were already enslaving Africans and sending them back to the, East, which was a part of the Arabian slave trade. So they kind of knew that, hey, look, we can do this thing a little bit better, but we just got to get in and do what we wanted to do. So it was a business opportunity for them. But what I learned as far as the ships and things of that nature, and as far as Columbus goes, is, Columbus comes after, other people that were already starting to hit that coast. And then when shipping technology broke away, it broke away actually before Columbus. Columbus needed permission to get to West Africa. Columbus needed permission to travel to the New World. Well, there was permission already granted in the age of discovery with other people. So now everybody's vying to discover these new lands. And, the Pope hands down the right to explore. So while all of this is going on, Columbus is learning these things. You know what I mean? People put Columbus on a pedestal like he discovered this new world, but no, he was learning things. He had to learn certain things, and then he had to do it with a bunch of people that he really, that he knew that was connivers, thieves, all kind of things. But what I know about my research in the transatlantic, and I spent a lot of time there. I spent like I think I spent like 3 years just studying the transatlantic kidnapping of our ancestors. and reading a lot. I have a lot of books and, information on that. Even presentations on the Mossi warrior clan regarding, like the slave trade. And what I find out is that these players, with permission, they took advantage of a lot of things. And imagine having to go to war with the locals to build Elmina. You know what I mean? Like, we weren't trying to give that up to them. They fought for that. Those West Africans fought to not have Elmina up. And then they learned that, okay, they're trying to give me something for it. So now it was something in it for them. And through trade and communicating with the king, and it was going to be peaceful and this, that, and the third, we were going to have your people work there and be able to do this and that and do business and all of that. Through all of that, they still took advantage of us. And, they got that fort built. That fort changed hands so many times. You had the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese. You had all these different European nations fighting for that piece of land for a particular reason. Not just that one, but all along the coast of West Africa, all the way down to Central and South, all the way down to Central. It's forts everywhere. It's tons of forts. And this is why we know that before Columbus, we were not here. You see what I'm saying? The business, once the age of discovery took place, things began to pop off for the Europeans. They began to test technology. They began to instead of getting stuck in those crosswinds and ships sinking and they losing lives, or the directional ships were going in a place that they couldn't get back to. They couldn't even get back to Europe in those ships if they got too far out in that ocean. They were pretty much like inline sailing, coming down that coastline, right along that little light water where they can tread, right? But they had a problem going back north. But soon as they found out that they can, those cross-directional sails and this little bitty piece that the harvest that made the sails change directions and catch winds and do all these other things, and they can control the way the ship would move in those cross-directional currents, they were on and popping to that. But we didn't take the time, and I'm saying we as a people, we didn't take the time to research shipbuilding and how that technology broke wind. We skipped that. We went straight to the, Columbus, he did this, that, and the third. We went straight to that. We never took the time to study how did this technology advance, give the Europeans an opportunity to advance into the New World. Remember, they were so heavily built on ships. They're fighting in the Mediterranean, shallow waters, and they're already shipbuilding up there. Africans are minding their business, building civilizations, having tribal conflicts with one another, but they were advancing in their own right, under their own understanding of how the world looked to them. Had nothing to do with what was going on in up there in the Mediterranean. They didn't want nothing to do with that. That broke peace for them.
Open Door with Vince Robinson returns with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right after this. You're listening to Open Door Cleveland on 95.9 FM WOVU, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
This program is sponsored by Citizens for Our Children's Future.
Cleveland residents, please support Issue 68. We've seen the graduation rate go up through 80%. We've seen our reading and our math scores increase.
If Issue 68 fails, essential funding runs out, a severe setback for kids.
Cleveland's children, schools, and future go together. That's why it's important that we vote for Issue 68.
Vote for Issue 68. Keep Cleveland kids moving ahead.
Supported by Citizens for Our Children's Future and WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
We're back with Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team right here on 95.9 FM WOVU.
So, me being an eternal student, I'm always interested to learn. That's why I purchased these books, and that's why I'm enjoying them so much, because, certain gaps are being filled in, and I'm like everybody else. I just want to know the truth. Yesterday, I read an article about the Seminole Wars in Florida. Now, I don't remember reading about the Seminole Wars when I was in high school. What I remember, what I remember is sitting in that classroom, looking through the pages and looking for us and not seeing us. And I was so concerned about that I confronted my teacher, Mr. Serini. I said, Mr. Serini, I know about slavery and I know about Dr. King, but what were we doing in the 20s? What were we doing in the 30s, the 40s? And it wasn't there. So much has been left out. And I'll share additionally that I grew up in a military family. So I had the benefit of traveling the United States and living outside of the country. I lived in the Philippines for a few years. So I went through this indoctrination. And I can remember being a child and just having a certain sense of pride about being an American and reading statistics about how America had the highest gross national product and all these things, all things American. But then when I got to a certain point in my learning, my curiosity helped me to discover that there was something missing. And that's why history is so important. Learning about the Seminole Wars and the fact that the Seminoles, from what I read, and it could be true or not true, I'm just telling you what I read, but how the Seminoles and how Africans joined together to fight against the Europeans who were trying to oppress them, and how they got assistance from the British government who didn't want the people in America to succeed. And we're talking about something that happened in the 1800s. It's not that long ago, but when you see how there's been a deliberate effort to leave things out that are part of the history of this country, because it puts Europeans in a certain standing in relation to everyone else, it's criminal. It's criminal to leave that out. And we continue to deal with the result of that exclusion. And that's what makes what you're doing with these books so important. I appreciate your response to the They Came Before Columbus issue, but I want to give you a chance to talk about both of these books. And you just mentioned volume 3, so I'm sure it's going to be equally as impactful. But could you talk about Spears of the Mossi and From Spears to Pens, what's in both books and what we should know about them?
Yes, sir. Well, Spears of the Mossi is pretty much an introduction to the Kofi Piesie Research Team with the blessings of the Mossi warrior clan. That is why the book starts with Brother Ben laying out the argument earlier on as far as how things have been created, and look at what they blossomed into. This was something that he and Unc West both envisioned. Research teams, writing, advancing knowledge, standing on the shoulders the shoulders of our ancestors, and spreading scientific literacy and research and proper research methodology, because there were tools used. So in Spears of the Mossi, in our initial surveys, we started with speaking about a multitude of things from a historical perspective, like the essence of Africa and how it's been preyed on by its enemies. And I say its enemies because like Dr. John Henry Clark has always told us, we have no friends. And when we look back and we research that, we can verify that and say that with a straight face. We have no friends. So while we're so eager to make friends with our enemies is beyond me. and we just don't want to do the things that we need to do amongst each other to collaborate and work together to do something monumental that has not been done in history since we've been enslaved. And so we start there. We talk about African traditions and customs. We talk about the African American experience as far as spiritual systems. Are they, are we doing the right thing from a different perspective, so to say? We talk about drumming. We mention, a lot. We talk about later in the book. We talk about a lot of misconceptions. So we deal with like misconceptions such as what our brothers and sisters who practice, and I say practice, which means you have the right to practice whatever you want, but practice the Hebrew Israelite faith or the biblical faith or whatnot, and they claim to be these Israelites in the Bible or the book or whatever, and they made claims or ties to West Africa, claiming to have, is Ouida really Judah? And they want to use that as their stomping grounds to say that they were these people in the land of Ouida, and they were not. And so you deal with that misconception. You deal with what we have, our brothers and sisters who now have left the church and began to practice an African tradition, kind of Americanized, and they call it, they call themselves Kemetic practitioners and so on and so forth. But to study Kemet, it wasn't what people think it is. And Wujawu, and I say this all the time, and I say this again, is the perfect example. People have changed clothes without taking a bath. So you left the church or Islam or even the Israelites, because we have a lot of people that have left the Hebrew Israelites, a lot of women at that, because of the disrespect that they encounter. But they leave these traditions or these practices, and then they run to Africa, and then they try to Americanize or Abrahamicize these African traditions. Now, notice in this, I never said spirituality, because I really don't like that word. This is an Americanized word used by, Rosicrucians and so on and so forth, who want to put all these particular practices and things of that nature into one bottle. Into one bowl. And Africa is not that. African traditions are that, traditions. They are customs. These are things that are practiced consistently on a daily basis. They wake up this way. They work this way. They talk this way. They eat this way. They play this way. Before they go to bed, they lay this way. They do all of these things. It's a tradition. It is a custom. It is a ritual. The way life is lived through the lenses of our brothers and sisters who practice the indigenous traditions and customs of our ancestors. So volume 1 deals with a multitude of things. Then we transfer that energy into volume 2 to follow up that. We begin to build a bridge from West Africa to the Americas, and we deal with what you mentioned, some hot topics. We talk about what is a human in there. We get a little scientific in that. We talk about the American experience, don't want to hang here. We talk about the 5 civilized tribes. We talk about Malik Ambar. We also get into some Islamic things that our brothers and sisters are caught up. We have brothers and sisters that practice, those traditions as well as those Arab traditions as well. And we have to deal with those perspectives. We talk about how one historian claims to know all of these things about West Africa, but really never really been to probably but only a couple of places. And then history touts him as a historian, and he's heavily sourced by people. And we need to be very careful. This comes with vetting our sources. So volume 2 is that work, that groundwork. It's out now. You have that piece of work. You're probably going to appreciate a lot of things throughout that book. There's a lot of jewels that have been dropped by each member in that particular volume as well. And as I said, we have volume 3 on the way. But in between those 2 books, Kofi and I have dropped children's books. Mine is One Night Before Bed. Kofi's is College Trip to the Motherland. My One Night Before Bed is geared toward educating, kids, I would say, between the ages of 6 and up. Teenagers and adults can even learn something from this. It's a multitude of, it's a storyline that has question and answers in there. It deals with science. It deals with archaeology, linguistics. It deals with a multitude of things from a learning perspective there. So it teaches our kids to be interactive. It's also a coloring book, so there's some spaces for you to color in there. Kofi's book, College Trip to the Motherland, is a beautiful book. It tells a story about a young daughter who is Gullah Geechee, who's already practicing things from her perspective. However, when she falls in love with music once she goes to Africa even more, and she starts seeing that, some people in like Sierra Leone, they're practicing some of the things that she was already practicing and doing and things like that. And she falls in love with them even more. And it's just become an amazing story. It also has questions and answers toward the end of the book. And, that we say that's about, a reading level as far as maybe 9, 10, or 11-year-old range. But it's a beautiful story written by Kofi. And, people should get that as well. All on KofiPiesieTV.com and also Amazon as well. But we did that like that for a reason, because we want to continue to work, and we're not just doing it for our own knowledge of self, but also our children's knowledge of self. So we need to implement them into studies as well and make reading and reading comprehension attractive again. And I mentioned 3 because it's being edited as we speak, and we have no official date of release for that yet, but we are working toward it. And when we get that, Brother Vince, you'll know that, and we'll deal with that book. That book is, I can tell you right now, we've been reading it. I've been reading it. A couple of brothers, we've been reading our own works. Oh my goodness. You're going to be pleased with that. That's going to be another history lesson for you that you'll appreciate. And you can expect some other future works from other members. It's not just me and Kofi. I know we probably talk more than the other brothers that's in the camp. But, it was good to have T'Challa here, Satepara. Sutek is in the chat. He's in your chat actually commenting.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Yeah, I put the link in that chat. I don't know why he didn't click on it, but he is commenting as well. And Brother Chris, he's in class right now. So outside of us working, some of us are still trying to get an education to advance knowledge, because we're really trying to do live by what we say. Mm-hmm. And demonstration beats conversation. And you had Brother Saw on here.
Yes.
So Brother Saw, is one of our teachers.
Okay.
And we all have Asar's works, a lot of his works. We're avid students. We sign up for classes. We try to lead in that light. I think he's an esteemed person to talk about and have on the show. So that was real big. People should know more about him and what he's doing. He's really one of the key connections to a lot of African scholarship on the continent that we have the opportunity to get to know and get our hands on. So we just use our tools, Vince. I'm not gonna lie to you. We use our tools. We take after our teachers. We take after our ancestors. We all just trying to, be better beings, but also uplift our people and give them something to look forward to, correct some wrongs, some misinformations here and there, get everybody on the right path, and, just help us all be better Africans.
Yes.
And I don't think people understand that from a cultural perspective.
Our thanks to Ini-Herit Khalfani and T'Challa Bangoura of the Kofi Piesie Research Team. Their books, Spears of the Mossi and From Spears to Pens, can be found by going to KofiPiesieTV.com. That's KofiPiesieTV.com or Amazon.com. That's it for another edition of Open Door. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Peace.